He'd spent months protecting his heart from love, until she smiled at him across a coffee table and suddenly, safety didn't matter anymore. It was just another Tuesday morning. You know, the kind where everything feels the same as yesterday and probably the same as tomorrow. Rain was pouring down outside, making that constant tapping sound against the windows. The kind of rain that makes you want to stay inside with something warm to drink. He walked into the coffee shop at exactly 8:15, just like he did every morning. Same time, same place, same order. A large black coffee with 1 sugar. Nothing fancy. He liked his routines. They made life simple, predictable, safe. The coffee shop was more crowded than usual. Makes sense. Nobody wants to stand in the rain waiting for a bus or walking to work when they can sit inside where it's warm and dry. Every table seemed full. People were chatting, typing on laptops, or just staring at their phones. He found his usual spot by the window in the corner. It was the best seat in the place. You could watch the rain, see people rushing by outside, and still have enough privacy to get work done. He pulled out his laptop, put in his earphones, and opened up the design project he'd been working on for the past week. Life had been like this for the past few months. Work, coffee, home, sleep, repeat. After his last relationship ended badly, he'd decided to keep things simple. No complications, no drama. Just focus on work and let everything else fade into the background. It was easier that way, safer, less chance of getting hurt again. He was deep into adjusting colors on a logo design when he noticed someone standing next to his table. He looked up. A woman was there, holding a coffee cup in one hand and a worn leather bag in the other. She smiled slightly and pointed at the empty chair across from him. The place was packed. Every other table had people sitting close together, sharing space with strangers. He nodded and pulled his laptop a bit closer to make room. She sat down, thanked him quietly, and immediately pulled out a notebook from her bag. He put his earphones back in and tried to focus on his work, but something kept pulling his attention away from the screen. Maybe it was the way she sat there, completely comfortable in the silence. Or maybe it was how focused she looked, sketching something in that old notebook of hers. She had paint stains on her fingers, small dots of blue and yellow that hadn't quite washed off. Her hair was pulled back in a messy way that looked like she hadn't really tried, but somehow it worked. She wore a simple gray sweater and jeans. Nothing fancy, but there was something about her that made it hard not to look. He caught himself glancing up at her more times than he should have. Each time he'd quickly look back at his screen, pretending to be absorbed in his work. But the designs weren't holding his attention the way they usually did. She was sketching something. Her hand moved smoothly across the page, confident and sure. Every now and then she'd pause, tilt her head slightly, and then continue. Whatever she was drawing had her complete attention. She didn't check her phone once, didn't look around the room, just stayed focused on her work. There was something calming about watching someone so absorbed in what they were doing. It reminded him of how he used to feel about his own work, before everything became just about deadlines and client revisions. About 20 minutes passed in comfortable silence. The rain continued outside. People came and went. The coffee shop filled with the usual morning sounds. The hiss of the espresso machine, quiet conversations, the clink of cups and spoons. Then it happened. They both reached for the sugar container at the exact same moment. Their hands almost touched. Both pulled back quickly. She looked up at him and smiled. Not a big smile, just a small, genuine one that reached her eyes. "Sorry," she said softly. "You go ahead." "No, please," he replied, sliding the sugar toward her. "I'm good." Their eyes met for just a second, maybe 2. But in that brief moment, something shifted. He couldn't explain it, couldn't put it into words. But there was a connection there. Small, quiet, but real. She added sugar to her coffee, stirred it slowly, and went back to her sketching. He went back to his laptop. But now he was even more distracted than before. He found himself wondering what she was drawing, what made someone sit in a crowded coffee shop and sketch while it rained outside, whether she came here often, what her story was. He shook his head slightly, trying to clear his thoughts. This was exactly what he'd been avoiding. Getting curious about someone, wondering about them. That's how things started, and he wasn't ready for any of that. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but still he couldn't help stealing another glance. This time he noticed she was drawing the coffee shop itself. The counter, the barista, the people scattered around. She had a talent for capturing small details. The way someone held their cup, the tired look on the barista's face, the rain-streaked windows. Time passed without him noticing. His coffee had gone cold. He'd barely made any progress on his work. This was unusual for him. He was always focused, always productive. But today felt different somehow. Around 9:30, she started packing up her things. She carefully closed her notebook, capped her pen, and placed everything back in her leather bag. She stood up, picked up her empty cup, and looked at him one more time. "Thanks for sharing the table," she said. "No problem," he replied. "Any time," she smiled again. That same soft smile. Then she turned and walked toward the door, navigating through the crowded coffee shop until she disappeared into the rainy street outside. He sat there for a moment, staring at the empty chair across from him. The space she'd occupied just seconds ago. Something felt different now. The coffee shop seemed a little quieter, a little less interesting, like when a good song ends and you're not quite ready for the silence that follows. He tried to go back to his work, but it was useless. His mind kept drifting back to her. The paint on her fingers, the way she got lost in her sketching. That brief moment when their eyes met over the sugar container. He closed his laptop with a sigh. Maybe he'd get more work done at home, or maybe he just needed to clear his head with a walk, even if it was still raining. He packed up his things and headed for the door. As he stepped outside into the cool rain, he pulled his jacket tighter and started walking. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he was already wondering if she'd be there tomorrow. If she was a regular like him, or just someone passing through on a rainy Tuesday. He told himself it didn't matter, that he wasn't looking for anything, that he was perfectly fine with his simple, predictable life. But deep down, in a place he wasn't quite ready to admit existed, he hoped he'd see her again. Because for the first time in months, something had felt alive inside him, something he thought had gone quiet for good. And even though it scared him a little, it also felt like maybe, just maybe, life was about to become a little less ordinary. The next morning, he told himself he wasn't going to the coffee shop because of her. He was going because that's what he did every Wednesday. Same routine, same schedule. It had nothing to do with wondering if she'd be there again, but he got there 5 minutes earlier than usual. And maybe he looked around a bit more carefully than normal when he walked in. The place was less crowded today. No rain to drive people inside. He could have sat anywhere, but he went straight to the same table by the window. He ordered his coffee, sat down, opened his laptop. Tried to look busy, tried to focus, but every time the door opened, his eyes would flick up just for a second to see who was coming in. Then she walked in. Same leather bag, same casual style, but today she wore a dark green jacket over a white shirt. Her hair was down this time, falling past her shoulders. She ordered at the counter, and while she waited, she looked around the coffee shop. Their eyes met. She smiled. Not surprised exactly, but pleased. Like running into an old friend you haven't seen in a while. She picked up her coffee and walked straight to his table. "Mind if I sit here again?" she asked. "Not at all," he said, moving his laptop to make space. His heart was beating a bit faster than it should have been for such a simple interaction. She sat down in the same chair as yesterday, pulled out that worn notebook, and settled in like this was the most natural thing in the world. And somehow it felt natural, comfortable, like they'd been sharing this table for years instead of just once before. "I'm glad you're here," she said suddenly, looking up from her notebook. "I realized yesterday I never introduced myself properly." They exchanged names. Short and simple. Nothing fancy about it. But now she wasn't just the woman with paint-stained fingers. She was real. A person with a name and a life and a story. "What are you working on?" she asked, nodding toward his laptop. "Logo design for a client," he said. "Nothing too exciting. Just trying to make a plumbing company look interesting." She laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm. "That sounds challenging. How do you make pipes exciting?" "Very carefully," he replied, and she laughed again. They fell into easy conversation after that. She told him she taught art at a community center a few blocks away. Kids mostly, ages 6 to 12. She showed up early to the coffee shop most mornings to work on her own projects before the chaos of teaching began. "What are you sketching?" he asked. She hesitated for just a moment, then turned the notebook around so he could see. It was the coffee shop again. But this time she'd drawn more details. The old clock on the wall, the chalkboard menu, the way the light came through the windows in the morning. And there in the corner, a rough sketch of someone sitting at a laptop. Is that me? He asked. Maybe, she said, a slight smile playing at her lips. I hope that's not weird. I just draw what I see. What catches my attention? It's not weird, he said. And he meant it. Actually, it felt kind of amazing that someone had noticed him enough to draw him. That he was interesting enough to be worth capturing on paper. The conversation drifted naturally from topic to topic. She asked about his work, seemed genuinely interested in the boring details of design software and difficult clients. He asked about teaching, and her face lit up as she talked about her students. There's this one kid, she said, her eyes sparkling, 7 years old, barely talks, but you give him paint and paper, and he creates these incredible things. All these emotions he can't say with words just pour out in color. He found himself leaning forward, caught up in her enthusiasm. When was the last time someone had talked to him like this? Really talked. Not small talk about the weather or shallow pleasantries, but real conversation about things that mattered. An hour passed without him noticing. Then another. His coffee had gone cold again, but he didn't care. She was telling him about the children's book she was working on, and he was completely absorbed in her description of the characters in the story. What's it about? He asked. It's about being afraid, she said, but not in a scary way. More about how everyone feels scared sometimes, and that's okay. That being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do things even when you are afraid. Something about the way she said it made him think she wasn't just talking about a children's book. There was something deeper there, something personal. That's beautiful, he said quietly. Thanks. She looked down at her notebook, then back up at him. I think adults need to hear that message just as much as kids do. Maybe more. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. The coffee shop buzzed with activity around them, but it felt like they were in their own small bubble. Their own quiet space in the middle of the noise. This became their routine. Every morning they'd meet at the same table. Sometimes they'd talk for hours. Other times they'd work in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing a thought or a question. He started looking forward to these mornings more than anything else in his day. She learned that he loved old movies. Black and white classics that most people their age had never heard of. She learned that he was afraid of trying new things. That he liked his life ordered and predictable because chaos scared him. He learned that she was the youngest of 4 siblings, that she'd moved to the city 3 years ago to chase her dream of being an artist, that she believed in taking chances even when they terrified her. Life's too short to play it safe all the time, she said one morning. But safety is underrated, he countered. Fewer surprises. Less disappointment. Maybe, she said. But also less joy, less adventure, less living. He didn't have a good answer to that, because deep down he knew she was right. He'd been playing it safe for months now, maybe longer, and what had it gotten him? Sure, he hadn't been hurt, but he hadn't felt much of anything either. Until now, 3 weeks went by like this. 3 weeks of morning coffee and easy conversation. 3 weeks of slowly opening up to someone in a way he hadn't done in a long time. 3 weeks of feeling something wake up inside him that he'd thought was gone for good. Then one Friday morning she didn't show up. He waited, telling himself she was just running late. Traffic, overslept. Something simple and explainable. But as the minutes turned into an hour, worry crept in. Had something happened? Was she okay? He realized with sudden clarity that he didn't have her phone number. Didn't know her address. Couldn't reach her. They'd spent nearly every morning together for 3 weeks, and somehow it had never occurred to him to exchange that basic information. He sat there feeling foolish and worried and disappointed all at once. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe he'd been stupid to let someone in, even just a little bit. Maybe this was the universe reminding him why he'd built walls in the first place. But then the door opened, and there she was, slightly out of breath, hair a bit messy, apologizing as she hurried over to their table. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Emergency at the community center." Pipe burst. Water everywhere. It's been chaos all morning. The relief he felt was almost overwhelming. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't forgotten. She was here. I was worried, he admitted before he could stop himself. She stopped mid-motion, her bag halfway to the floor. She looked at him, really looked at him, and smiled. That soft smile that did something strange to his breathing. "Were you?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," he said. "I was." Something shifted between them in that moment. An acknowledgement. An understanding. This wasn't just casual coffee shop acquaintances anymore. This was something else, something more, something that both excited and terrified him. She pulled out her phone. "Give me your number." Just in case of future plumbing disasters. He typed his number into her phone and she sent him a quick text so he'd have hers. Such a simple exchange, but it felt significant, like crossing a line they couldn't uncross. As she sat down and pulled out her notebook, she looked at him one more time. "I'm glad you were worried. I'd have been worried too." And in that moment, sitting in their corner of the coffee shop with the morning sun streaming through the windows, he realized he was in trouble, the kind of trouble you can't plan your way out of. The kind that makes your heart race and your palms sweat and your carefully controlled life feel suddenly unpredictable. He was starting to care. Really care. And that scared him more than anything. The text came on a Wednesday afternoon while he was in the middle of a client meeting. His phone buzzed and he glanced down quickly, expecting it to be something work-related. Instead, it was from her. "There's a small art gallery opening Friday night. Some local artists. Nothing fancy. Want to come?" He stared at the message for a long moment. This was different from their morning coffee meetups. This was intentional. This was her inviting him into her world, outside of their safe corner table. This felt like a date, even though neither of them would probably call it that. His finger hovered over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to make an excuse. Say he was busy. Keep things simple and uncomplicated. But another part of him, the part that had been waking up lately, wanted to say yes more than anything. "I'd love to," he typed back before he could overthink it. Friday evening arrived faster than he expected. He changed clothes 3 times, which was ridiculous. It wasn't like he had that many options anyway. Finally settled on dark jeans and a button-up shirt. Too dressy? Not dressy enough? He had no idea. When was the last time he'd actually gone somewhere that wasn't work or the coffee shop? The gallery was in a renovated warehouse downtown, the kind of place with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting. Through the large windows, he could see people already inside, holding wine glasses, looking at paintings on the walls. Suddenly, walking in there felt impossible. He stood outside for a full minute, trying to convince himself to just go in. What was he doing here? He didn't know anything about art. He'd stick out like a sore thumb. Everyone would know he didn't belong. But then he thought about her smile. That soft smile that made everything else disappear, and he pulled open the door. The gallery was more crowded than it looked from outside. Maybe 40 or 50 people scattered around the space. Conversations hummed in the air, mixing with soft music playing from speakers he couldn't see. The walls were covered with paintings, photographs, and mixed media pieces he didn't quite understand, but found interesting anyway. He scanned the room, looking for her. His heart was beating too fast. His palms were slightly sweaty. This was ridiculous. He was a grown adult, not a teenager at his first school dance. Then he saw her. She was on the far side of the gallery, standing with a group of people. She wore a dark blue dress, simple but beautiful. Her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. She was laughing at something someone said. Her whole face lit up with genuine joy. She looked different here, more confident, more in her element. This was her world and she belonged in it completely. He felt suddenly out of place, overdressed in his button-up shirt, underdressed compared to some of the people around him. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he should just leave before she even noticed he was here. But then she turned. Her eyes swept across the room and they found him, standing there awkwardly near the entrance, probably looking as uncomfortable as he felt. And her face changed. The polite smile she'd been wearing transformed into something brighter, warmer. Something real. She excused herself from the group she was with and started walking toward him. Time seemed to slow down in that moment. He noticed everything. The way she moved through the crowded gallery, weaving between people with easy grace. The way her dress caught the light. The way her eyes never left his face as she got closer. People moved around them. Conversations continued. The music kept playing. But all of that faded into background noise. All he could see was her walking toward him with that smile on her face. She came closer. Stopped just inches away from him. Close enough that he caught the faint scent of her perfume. Something light and floral that made his head spin slightly. "You came," she said softly, and the happiness in her voice was unmistakable. "I came," he replied, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. She smiled. That soft, gentle smile that seemed meant only for him. In that moment, surrounded by dozens of people in a crowded gallery, it felt like they were the only two people in the world, and he forgot to breathe. It wasn't dramatic. There was no background music swelling, no slow-motion movie moment. It was just him, standing there looking at her smile, and suddenly his lungs forgot how to work. His heart was doing something strange in his chest. The noise of the gallery faded completely. All he could see was her. The warmth in her eyes, the curve of her smile, the way she looked at him like he was the only person she'd wanted to see tonight. "I'm really glad you're here," she said, and she reached out and touched his arm gently. Just a light touch, her fingers resting on his forearm for barely a second, but it sent electricity through his entire body. "Me too," he managed to say, though speaking felt difficult when he couldn't quite remember how to breathe properly. "Come on," she said, taking his hand naturally, as if they'd done this 100 times before. "Let me show you around." Her hand in his felt right, natural, like it belonged there. She led him through the gallery, stopping at different pieces, telling him about the artists, sharing her thoughts on the work. He tried to focus on what she was saying, tried to look at the art, but he kept getting distracted by her. The way she got excited about certain pieces. The way she'd tilt her head when she was thinking. The way she'd squeeze his hand gently when she wanted to show him something she particularly loved. Every small gesture, every moment of connection, made it harder to maintain the walls he'd built around his heart. They stopped in front of a large painting. Abstract swirls of blue and gold that seemed to move even though they were standing still. She stared at it for a long moment, quiet. "What do you see?" she asked him. He looked at the painting, really looked. "I see chaos, but organized chaos, like everything's moving and changing, but there's still some kind of order to it. Some kind of purpose." She turned to look at him, surprised. "That's exactly it. That's exactly what the artist intended." "How did you know?" "I didn't," he admitted. "I was just saying what it felt like to me." "You have a good eye," she said. "Better than you think." They continued through the gallery. She introduced him to some of the artists who were friendly and welcoming. He felt less out of place than he'd expected, maybe because she was beside him, making everything feel easier. As the evening went on, they drifted away from the crowds, finding a quieter corner of the gallery. They stood close together, talking quietly while the party continued around them. She told him about her dreams of having her own showing someday. He told her about his secret wish to do more creative work instead of corporate logos. "Why don't you?" she asked. "Fear mostly," he admitted. "What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? What if you're amazing?" She countered. "What if you never know because you were too afraid to try?" Her words hit him harder than they should have. Because she wasn't just talking about work. She was talking about life, about taking chances, about being brave enough to go after what you really want. "You make it sound easy," he said. "It's not easy," she replied. "I'm terrified most of the time. But I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and wondering what if." They stayed until the gallery started emptying out. The evening had flown by in what felt like minutes but had actually been hours. As they walked toward the exit, she slipped her hand back into his, and this time he was the one who squeezed gently. Outside, the night air was cool and refreshing after the warmth of the crowded gallery. The city lights glowed around them. People walked by, heading to restaurants or bars or home. Normal Friday night life happening all around them. "Can I walk you home?" he asked. "I'd like that," she said. They walked slowly through the city streets, not in any hurry to end the night. She told him more stories about her students. He told her about the worst client he'd ever had. They laughed. They talked. They were quiet sometimes, but it was the good kind of quiet, the comfortable kind. When they reached her building, they stood outside, neither quite ready to say goodbye. The streetlight above them cast soft shadows. Somewhere in the distance they could hear music from a bar, people laughing. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said. "It meant a lot to me." "Thank you for inviting me," he replied. "I had a really good time." She stepped closer. They were standing so close now that he could see the flecks of gold in her eyes, could count her eyelashes if he wanted to, could feel the warmth radiating from her. "I'm glad we met," she said softly, "that rainy Tuesday. I'm glad you let me sit at your table." "Me too," he whispered. She rose up on her toes slightly and kissed his cheek, soft and quick, but it sent his heart racing. Then she smiled at him one more time, that beautiful soft smile, and turned toward her building. "Good night," she said over her shoulder. "Good night," he replied, watching her go inside. He stood there on the sidewalk for a long moment after she disappeared. His cheek still tingled where her lips had touched. His heart was still racing. His mind was spinning with everything that had happened tonight. He started walking home, but he barely noticed the streets he passed. Barely noticed the people around him. All he could think about was her. Her smile. Her laugh. The way his hand felt holding hers. The way she looked at him like he mattered. And he realized with absolute certainty that scared him more than anything. He was falling for her. Actually falling. No more pretending it was just friendship. No more telling himself it was just nice to have someone to talk to over morning. The weekend after the gallery opening felt different. Everything felt different. He spent Saturday replaying every moment of Friday night in his mind. Her smile. Her hand in his. The kiss on his cheek. The way his heart had raced when she stood close to him. Sunday morning, he woke up with a strange feeling in his chest. Not the good kind of strange. The uncomfortable kind. The kind that made him question everything. He stared at his phone. She'd sent a text Saturday afternoon. Just something simple about hoping he had a good weekend. He'd replied with something equally casual. But now he kept thinking about texting her again. And that thought scared him. When had he become the kind of person who checked his phone constantly hoping for a message? When had he started planning his days around seeing someone? When had he let someone get this close? Monday morning came and he almost didn't go to the coffee shop. For the first time in months, he considered breaking his routine. Working from home. Avoiding the place where he knew she'd be waiting. But that felt cowardly. So he went. 20 minutes later than usual, but he went. She was already there, at their table. 2 coffee cups in front of her. She smiled when she saw him. That warm smile that used to make everything feel right. But today, it made his chest tighten with something that felt uncomfortably like panic. "Hey," she said as he sat down. "I got your coffee. Figured you might be running late." "Thanks," he said, taking the cup. It was the exact way he liked it. She'd remembered. They fell into conversation, but something was off. He could feel it, and he was pretty sure she could too. He kept his answers shorter than usual. Didn't ask as many questions. Created a small but noticeable distance between them. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She tilted her head slightly, studying his face. "Is everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," he lied. "Just tired. Busy weekend." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. They sat together for another 30 minutes, but the easy comfort they usually shared felt strained. When he said he needed to get to work early and left before she did, he saw something flicker across her face. Hurt, maybe, or confusion. He felt terrible about it, but he also felt relieved to have some space. Some time to think without her sitting across from him, making him feel things he wasn't ready to feel. The next morning, he worked from home. Sent her a quick text saying he had early meetings and couldn't make it to the coffee shop. It wasn't entirely a lie. He did have meetings, just not that early. Wednesday, he went to the coffee shop but arrived an hour later than usual. After their normal meeting time, the table by the window was empty. Part of him felt relieved. Part of him felt disappointed. Most of him just felt confused. This became his pattern. Making excuses. Showing up late. Keeping his texts short and infrequent. Creating distance. Building back the walls he'd let come down. He told himself he was being smart. Protecting himself. His last relationship had ended badly, and he'd promised himself he wouldn't let anyone close enough to hurt him like that again. He'd been doing fine on his own. Life was simple, predictable, safe, and then she'd come along and complicated everything. Made him want things he'd convinced himself he didn't need. Made him feel things he'd sworn he was done feeling. It was better this way. Pull back now before things got even more serious, before he fell any deeper, before the inevitable ending that would leave him broken again. But if it was the right decision, why did he feel so miserable? His work started suffering. He'd sit at his computer staring at designs that didn't come together right. His concentration was shot. He'd catch himself thinking about her at random moments, wondering what she was doing, if she was at the coffee shop, if she missed their morning talks as much as he did. His friends noticed something was wrong, asked if he was okay. He brushed them off, said he was fine, just stressed about work. They didn't believe him, but they let it go. 2 weeks passed like this. 2 weeks of avoiding her while simultaneously missing her constantly. 2 weeks of knowing he was hurting her and hating himself for it, but feeling too afraid to do anything different. Then, on a Thursday evening, he found something slipped under his apartment door. A folded piece of paper. His hand shook slightly as he picked it up and opened it. It was a sketch. Simple but beautiful. 2 coffee cups sitting side by side on a table, steam rising from both of them in delicate swirling lines. Below the drawing, in her handwriting, a short message. I miss my friend. No pressure, just coffee. I'll be at our table tomorrow morning if you want to talk, or if you just want to sit in silence. Either way, I'll be there. He read it 3 times. Then he sat down on his couch, still holding the paper, and felt something crack open inside his chest. She wasn't angry. She wasn't demanding explanations. She was just offering space, offering friendship, offering to be there if he needed her. And suddenly all his fear felt small and stupid in comparison to what he was losing. He'd spent 2 weeks protecting himself from potential hurt. But in doing so, he'd guaranteed the hurt would happen. He'd pushed away someone who made him feel alive for the first time in months. Someone who made him laugh. Someone who challenged him to be braver than he thought he could be. What was he doing? His therapist had told him once that the opposite of love isn't hate. It's fear. Fear of being hurt. Fear of being vulnerable. Fear of not being enough. And he let fear make all his decisions. Let it convince him that safety was more important than connection. But sitting there in his apartment holding her sketch, he realized something. He'd been so busy protecting himself from the possibility of pain that he'd forgotten what he was protecting. An empty life. A safe life. A life where nothing bad happened because nothing real happened at all. Is that really what he wanted? To wake up 20 years from now and realize he'd spent his whole life avoiding risk and missing out on everything beautiful that came with it? He thought about her smile, the way she got excited talking about her students, the way she'd held his hand at the gallery like it was the most natural thing in the world, the way she looked at him like he mattered. She was offering him something rare, something real, and he'd been too scared to hold on to it. He stood up, suddenly filled with determination. He'd spent 2 weeks running away. Tomorrow he'd do something different. Tomorrow he'd be brave enough to run toward something instead. That night he barely slept. He kept rehearsing what he'd say, how he'd explain, how he'd apologize for pushing her away. But every version he came up with sounded wrong. Too formal, too casual, not honest enough. Finally, around 3 in the morning, he realized he'd just have to be honest. Tell her the truth, that he'd gotten scared, that his feelings for her had become real, and real feelings meant real risk, and that had terrified him, that he'd been protecting himself but in doing so had hurt the one person he didn't want to hurt. Morning came slowly. He got ready, changed his shirt twice, and headed to the coffee shop earlier than he had in weeks. His heart was pounding. His hands were sweaty. He felt like he might be sick. What if she wasn't there? What if she'd changed her mind? What if she'd decided he wasn't worth the trouble? He pushed open the door to the coffee shop. The familiar smell of coffee hit him. The familiar sounds of the espresso machine and quiet conversation. And there, at their table by the window, she sat. She looked up as he walked in. Their eyes met. And for a moment, neither of them moved. He couldn't read her expression. Couldn't tell if she was happy to see him or hurt or angry or indifferent. Then slowly she smiled. Not the big warm smile he remembered. Something smaller. More careful. But it was a smile. He walked over to the table. His heart was beating so fast he thought it might burst out of his chest. "Hey," he said, his voice rough. "Hey," she replied. "Want to sit?" He sat down in the chair across from her. The same chair where this had all started. Where she'd sat on that rainy Tuesday morning and changed everything without even trying. "I'm sorry," he said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I'm so sorry. I got scared and I ran and that was wrong." "You didn't deserve that." She was quiet for a moment, just looking at him. Then she spoke, her voice soft but steady. "What scared you?" This was it. The moment of truth. He could make up something easier. Something that wouldn't make him quite so vulnerable. Or he could be honest. Really honest. For maybe the first time in a long time, he chose honesty. "You did," he said. "This did. How much I care about you. How much you make me feel. I got hurt before and I promised myself I wouldn't let anyone close enough to hurt me again." And then you came along and suddenly all my walls didn't matter anymore. You just walked right through them like they weren't even there. She listened without interrupting, waited for him to continue. I've been trying so hard to keep my life simple and safe, he went on. And then you showed up and made everything complicated. Made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. Made me feel things I'd sworn I was done feeling. And that terrified me. So I pushed you away, he admitted, his voice quiet. Yeah, I did. And it was stupid and cowardly, and I'm sorry. She was silent for a long moment. Long enough that he started to panic, thinking maybe he'd waited too long. Maybe sorry wasn't enough. Maybe he'd already ruined everything. Then she reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her touch was warm and gentle, and it made his throat tight. I've been hurt too, she said softly. I know what it's like to be scared, to want to protect yourself, to think that maybe it's easier to just not try. He looked up at her, surprised. She always seemed so confident, so sure of herself, so brave. I almost didn't come back after that first day, she continued. When I sat at your table that rainy Tuesday, I went home that night and thought about how easy it would be to just go to a different coffee shop, to not risk getting attached to someone new, to stay safe. Why did you come back? He asked. She smiled, a real smile this time. Because I was tired of being safe, tired of letting fear make my choices, and because there was something about you, something that made me think maybe, just maybe, taking a risk might be worth it. His heart was doing that thing again, that racing, uncomfortable, wonderful thing. I'm scared, he admitted. I'm really scared. Of getting hurt. Of not being enough. Of messing this up. Me too, she said. I'm terrified. But I'd rather be scared and trying than safe and alone. Life's too short to live it behind walls. He thought about the past 2 weeks. How miserable he'd been. How much he'd missed her. How empty the coffee shop felt without her sitting across from him. How quiet his mornings were without her laugh. I don't want to hide anymore, he said. I don't want to let fear make my decisions. But I don't know how to do this. How to be brave. You're already being brave, she said. You showed up. You told me the truth. That's bravery, not the absence of fear, but choosing to do something even when you are afraid. Those words hit him hard, because she was right. Bravery wasn't about not being scared. It was about being scared and doing it anyway. I want to try, he said. I want to try this, whatever this is between us. I want to be the kind of person who takes chances, who doesn't run when things get real. Then let's try together, she said. Both of us. Scared but trying. Something shifted in that moment, like a weight lifting off his shoulders. Like breathing after holding your breath for too long. He'd spent weeks running from his feelings, and all it had done was make him miserable. Now sitting here with her hand in his, choosing to be vulnerable, he felt more alive than he had in years. Can we start over? He asked. Not all the way over. But from here, no more running. No more hiding. I'd like that, she said. They sat there for a while just talking. Really talking. About their fears and their hopes. About past hurts and future dreams. About all the messy, complicated, beautiful things that make us human. She told him about her last relationship. How it had ended with someone who said they loved her but never really saw her. Never valued her art or her dreams. Someone who made her feel like she had to be smaller to fit into their life. He told her about his ex. About feeling like he'd given everything and still wasn't enough. About the slow death of something that had once felt alive. About how it had left him convinced that maybe he just wasn't built for lasting love. But I don't want to believe that anymore, he said. I don't want my past to write my future. Then don't let it, she said simply. They stayed at the coffee shop until it closed. Hours passing like minutes, making up for lost time, rebuilding the connection he'd almost destroyed with his fear. As they walked out into the evening air, she slipped her hand into his again. This time he squeezed back immediately. No hesitation, no second guessing. Want to walk for a bit? She asked. Yeah, he said. I'd like that. They walked through the city streets as the sun set. Not going anywhere in particular. Just walking together. They passed busy restaurants and quiet parks. Street musicians playing for spare change. People hurrying home from work. The city alive around them. I've been working on something, she said as they walked. A new sketch. Want to see it? She pulled out her phone and showed him a photo. It was a drawing of the coffee shop. Their table by the window. 2 people sitting across from each other. You couldn't see their faces clearly, but you could see the way they leaned toward each other, the way their hands almost touched across the table, the way they existed in their own small world despite the crowded room around them. "That's us," he said softly. "That's us," she confirmed. From that first day, I knew even then there was something special happening. "I just didn't know if you felt it too." "I felt it," he said. "I just didn't want to admit it. Not even to myself." They ended up at a small park overlooking the river. The city lights were starting to come on, reflecting off the water. A few other people were scattered around, but it felt private, intimate. They sat on a bench close together. Her head rested on his shoulder. His arm wrapped around her. It felt natural, right, like they'd been doing this for years instead of just starting. "Can I tell you something?" she said after a while. "Anything. When I left that note under your door, I wasn't sure you'd come. Part of me thought maybe you'd decided I wasn't worth the risk, that maybe I'd pushed too hard or wanted too much." He pulled back slightly so he could look at her face. "You're worth every risk, every fear, every moment of uncertainty." "I'm sorry it took me so long to figure that out." She smiled up at him, that soft, beautiful smile that had started all of this. And just like that first night at the gallery, time seemed to slow down. The noise of the city faded. All he could see was her. She shifted closer. He could feel her breath on his face, could see the flecks of gold in her eyes even in the fading light. His heart was racing again, but this time he welcomed it. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said quietly, "if that's okay." "That's more than okay," she whispered. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind. But she didn't pull away. She met him halfway, and when their lips finally touched, it felt like coming home, like finding something he didn't know he'd been searching for. The kiss was soft at first, gentle, testing, then deeper as the uncertainty melted away. His hand came up to cup her face. Her fingers tangled in his hair, and for those few moments nothing else existed. Not his fear, not his past, not his doubts. Just her, just this, just now. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "Wow," he said. She laughed. "Yeah, wow." They sat there for a while longer, kissing sometimes, talking quietly, just being together. The world continued around them. The river flowed. The city lights grew brighter. People passed by without noticing the two people on the bench who were falling in love. Eventually, reluctantly, they decided they should probably head home. It was getting late. The park was mostly empty now. He walked her to her building. They stood outside, neither wanting the night to end, knowing that this time everything was different. No more walls, no more running, just two people choosing to be brave together. "Tomorrow morning?" she asked. "Coffee shop?" "Tomorrow morning," he confirmed. "And the morning after that. And the one after that." "Good," she said, rising on her toes to kiss him once more. "Because I'm not planning on letting you disappear again." "I'm not planning on disappearing," he said. "Not anymore." She went inside, turning at the door to wave. He waited until she was safely in before starting his walk home. The city felt different now. Brighter somehow. More alive. Or maybe it was the same, and he was the one who was different, who was finally alive again after months of just existing. He thought about all the things that had led to this moment. The rainy Tuesday when she'd needed a place to sit. The conversations over coffee. The art gallery. The 2 weeks of fear and distance. The note under his door. The choice to be brave enough to show up and be honest. Any one of those things could have gone differently. She could have sat somewhere else. He could have kept his walls up. He could have thrown away her note and kept hiding. But he didn't, and neither did she. They'd both chosen courage over fear, vulnerability over safety, the risk of something real over the comfort of nothing at all. When he got home, he didn't go straight to bed. Instead, he sat by his window looking out at the city, thinking about her, about them, about the future that suddenly felt full of possibility instead of just predictable routine. His phone buzzed. A text from her. "Thank you for being brave today, for showing up, for trying. You have no idea how much it means to me." He smiled and typed back. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for leaving that note, for being patient with my fear. I'm going to work every day on being brave enough to deserve you." Her response came quickly. "You already do. See you in the morning. Sweet dreams." He fell asleep that night with a smile on his face, No anxiety, no second guessing. No fear, just peace and excitement for tomorrow, for coffee shop mornings and shared conversations and all the small, beautiful moments that make up a life lived together. He'd spent so long protecting himself from the possibility of pain that he'd forgotten what he was missing. Joy, connection, love. The kind of love that makes you want to be braver than you thought possible, the kind that challenges you to grow, to open up, to be vulnerable and honest and real. And as he drifted off to sleep, he thought about that moment at the